So one of the funniest parts about the job was, well, I have my own brand Fizzy, but I also do growth for a hemp dispensary. And so we do deliveries around the area. And, we was talking to one of the drivers one day and he was like, hey, I just stopped off at a retirement community. This woman ordered like $3,000 worth of product and she just gives it out to everybody at the nursing home. And so I went in there one day because I was just curious and somebody had my product there, Fizzy, and I was talking to the gentleman a little bit, and he was like, "Yeah, I just kind of crush this up and put it in my applesauce and go about my day." So I was like, "Oh, all right, well, whatever works. I'm glad it's working for you."
Welcome back to Worldie Unboxed, the Founders Edition. This episode is a two-parter featuring David Gonzalez, founder of Fizzy THC, a dissolvable beverage enhancing tablet. In part one, we dive into David's journey into cannabis, how he built Fizzy THC, and the legal hurdles he's faced along the way. In part two, Aaron and I will unpack the key lessons from our conversation with David and relate them to our own experience at Worldie. Join the Worldie community at worldiebrand.com and check out our episode highlights on our YouTube channel. All right, let's talk to David.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I live in the Midwest. I've lived in the Midwest for like a long time,
Hmm.
and I never knew that Minneapolis was this kind of like, I guess, cannabis hub or THC hub, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So it all kind of happened in the summer of 2022. So there was a little bit of a market beforehand in previous years. Obviously, the Farm Bill in 2018 kind of allowed for these low dose cannabis products to be sold across the country. But it's pretty funny. In 2022, when this legislation passed, they were trying to regulate Delta 8, which is a synthetic compound for THC, and inadvertently allowed for the sale of Delta 9 THC, which is a natural part of the plant. So when that happened, the quote literally was like, "Oh my God, did we just pass recreational weed on accident?" And they didn't right then, but a year later they did. But yeah, once that passed, it kind of opened the floodgates. And so one of the things that was really nice was all these THC seltzers really just came out of the woodworks. That primarily started with breweries. So obviously they lost a ton of revenue from COVID. So the fact that they had this lifeline and being able to offer THC seltzers, gummies, the masses really drove up the market. And now it's pretty crazy. This is the only market or really place on earth, which is nuts to say, that has the amount of locations where you can go buy cannabis. So over 3,000 plus places that you can go and grab some low dose products, whether if it's hemp derived, but it's just crazy that it all kind of started in our backyard.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. I would have thought so. Brandon lives in Colorado. I would have thought like maybe Colorado is the place to be for that kind of stuff, but it sounds like it's Minnesota.
Yeah, it's kind of two different markets. So you have your marijuana, your recreational market, which Colorado is a big spearhead of, and then what's kind of burgeoning now or blossoming is this low dose hemp derived THC market. I think there's a very healthy appetite for people who want kind of like that functional cannabis, kind of these lower dose products that um, you know the average stoner can still enjoy, but at the same time, it kind of lowers that barrier of entry to a lot of people who are new to the plant or new to cannabis in general. So, having a sip of a seltzer instead of, ripping a joint, it's a much different experience. And so, it's been pretty interesting to see the different demographics of people who have started using cannabis. It's a much different demographic than you would imagine.
So what
Yeah.
what what is that demographic?
Um, so the number one demographic for at least the THC seltzer craze is probably millennial women, so women in their 30s or so. Gen Z has picked up a lot too. They're not drinking booze as much, so they're replacing that with cannabis. Surprisingly, boomers. So one of the funniest parts about the job was, well, I have my own brand Fizzy, but I also do growth for a hemp dispensary, and so we do deliveries around the area. And, we was talking to one of the drivers one day and he was like, Hey, I just stopped off at a retirement community. This woman ordered like $3,000 worth of product and she just gives it out to everybody at the nursing home. And so I went in there one day because I was just curious and somebody had my product there, Fizzy. And I was talking to the gentleman a little bit and he was like, yeah, I just kind of crush this up and put it in my applesauce and go about my day. So I was like, oh, all right, well, whatever works. I'm glad it's working for you.
No, that's super funny. Brandon, it sounded like you wanted to say something before.
No, I was just agreeing with you, David, that the Colorado consumers is probably a lot different than the Minnesota one. They're not as functional. They're not
Yeah.
a as functional consumer, I should say.
Yeah, and I do think the other part that's really fascinating is just the access piece. And so, obviously, in most states where recreational marijuana is legal, you have to go to a dispensary to get it. In Minnesota, I can go to a grocery store and there's a whole aisle of THC drinks I can grab when I'm shopping with my kid. And so, I think just not having to pull out cash, go through security, have somebody go to the back room and grab a product for you and kind of usher you out the door. It's just a wildly different experience. And so I think just the access piece that Minnesota allowed for just really normalized cannabis use and kind of ingrained it a little bit into the culture. So there's a ton of people now, especially dry January, giving up booze and going with THC drinks because you still get a nice buzz, a nice like wine kind of relaxing feeling. But I'm in my 30s now. Hangovers kick my ass for 2 days, so it's a much better alternative.
I feel you on that.
Yeah, I'm headed there. Brandon is already in his 30s. I'm headed there soon. Yeah.
Already there, man.
Glory days.
And
Mhm.
how'd you get interested in cannabis? I guess from like a business
Sure.
perspective. I mean, if you want to talk about from a personal perspective too,
Sure.
you could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what really made me dive in head first was my background's been in startups, SaaS companies, e-commerce, and so I worked with a handful of e-commerce brands. And at the last startup I was at, it was a returns management company. So you don't like a product, it's broken, whatever. How do you get a replacement quickly? And I just did not realize how difficult it was for cannabis businesses to actually operate because there's so many different rules, regulations, taxes, all these different things. You can't use the same tools that people use. And so for me, when I look at that, my first inclination was like, oh, that sucks. But as I kind of looked into it more and more, I got fascinated at the problem solving piece. How do you actually like scale a cannabis business when you have so many things going against you? And so, I kind of, again, speaking of just the crazy conditions, so this whole craze was happening in Minnesota with the THC beverage market and the low dose market, and I'm talking to cannabis retailers who are just starting to get going online, and it really dawned on me like, oh my God, there's going to be this huge wave of direct consumer cannabis brands that are going to capitalize on this and create a category. And so when that happened, and when I saw was happening, not just online, but in retail, brick and mortar stores in Minnesota, I was like, the opportunity there is just nuts. So after it took a while, I'll be honest. I started working on this project while I was still at that startup, and after a while, you get that spark where you can't focus on the day-to-day stuff at your job, and you need to really just dive into the project. So I was sitting there one summer with my business partner, who's a good friend of mine. He has a vitamin and supplement manufacturing company who it's going to be called VitaPros, but we were sitting there on his porch and he was like, "Hey, have you tried these THC seltzers?" And I was like, "Yeah, they're all right." Because the first ones that came out, it's they've come a long way. I'll say that. So we tried a few of them and we were like, man, wouldn't this be great if we could just make our own? Just having like a THC Coke or THC coffee, like whatever. And then kind of dawned on us and was like, oh, we actually could do that. So he had the entire manufacturing infrastructure set up already. And so we were sitting there and we were trying to first solve the problem like, all right, how could we actually make one of these drinks? We didn't want to, go the drink route per se with having a canning line, co-packing, all of that stuff. It's a lot more complicated. And so since he had this infrastructure set up already for vitamins, supplements, capsules, kind of health and wellness, we were like, you know what? if we wanted to make a drink, we could use the infrastructure that's set up. So came up first, we had looked at a liquid option, like a drop tincture type of idea, because we're like, that's probably what people are used to. From there, we realized that the other big kind of value prop, so to speak, was the portability piece. So being able to make a drink anywhere you are. So like going to a concert, going to a sporting event, going to church, like wherever, it doesn't matter. And so once we realized that liquids probably wouldn't do it, we started getting to the powder side of things. And so we looked at stick packs for a little bit. There's a few companies that do that already. But ultimately, we realized that if we condense that powder down into a tablet, we could basically take these things with us anywhere, drop them in drinks we wanted, very discreet. There's no smell, no odor. And you literally drop it into your drink and it disappears, and no one knows you have a THC beverage in front of you. So that's kind of how I got super involved in the cannabis space. But while I'm saying all this, the other crazy part that kind of lined up was two buddies of mine from high school had, by happenstance, launched a hemp dispensary around early 2020s, and they had a blossoming business going on at the same time too. And so I started connecting with them, and I was like, hey, if you guys can really crack this online ordering piece and this e-commerce piece, it's going to open you up to all different types of markets, all different types of people. You can ship products across state lines, and then you're not just worried about brick and mortar. And so over the past year or so, it's been a crazy learning experience. But the other part that's so fun about this is it's still so brand new that there's just anything you find out, it's like a novelty for people. So now for the hemp dispensary, we sell over 150 different types of THC drinks, and it's not hyperbole to say like we probably have the largest data set of online transactions for THC beverages, and like what can you learn about that? So it's been really interesting to straddle it as a founder, somebody who launched my own brand, my own product, and then B, also being able to work so closely with all these other different types of brands who are in a similar position. Because not only do I sell my products, I sell theirs through the dispensary as well. So um, basically, I dived in head first with Fizzy, our company, our brand, and then slowly joined Hemp House, which is the online dispensary. And since then, it's just been a roller coaster.
And how long have you been running Fizzy for?
So we launched Fizzy on 420 this year. So it's been about 8 months or so. The idea started back in July of 2022, but it's a very tricky product to make. I don't think a lot of people realize just how tricky it is to make a tablet that dissolves in any kind of different drink. So it did take us time to nail that down. And again, we started off looking at some different types of liquids, some different types of stick packs, but ultimately we had to come up with a custom formula. And it took us a while to really reconcile that piece of how do you make something that's hard enough to transport and survive being with you everywhere, but also soft enough to dissolve quickly. So that manufacturing piece was definitely a tricky component.
So what was that process like, that formulation process? Was it just you giving the requirements and then the factory kind of like working through it? Or I guess how did you go from
Yeah,
something that seemed hard to do to actually getting something that worked?
testing. Yeah, a lot of testing. We kind of did that lean approach, if you will, where we wanted to get a prototype out there, get feedback, and keep iterating and get better. But basically, to get started, we my business partner, who's got a pharmacy background, we had a few compounds that we knew could potentially work together, and basically keep the tablet compact, but also allow it to dissolve when it reacted in a liquid. And so, luckily, since he had that background of being able to work with so many other supplement companies, he had a loose idea for the ingredients that would go in it. But it was tough. We would put it in a seltzer and it would react differently than a Coke or a coffee versus a water. And so we really had to um, test a lot of different types of drinks, and even the shape of the tablet, made a difference for us too. So that was one component. And then I went to school out in Boston and had a bunch of contacts out there on the East Coast, a few people at MIT. And so we did get a chance to just throw ideas off them like, hey, do you have any other types of formulations, different compounds that we could check out? And it was pretty funny because a lot of those guys, they'll love to help you because it's a problem. They think it's awesome. They're in, pharmaceuticals, biotech, whatever. But they're like, hey, just for the record though, this is a cannabis product. My PhD or whoever is not gonna like that if I'm attached to this thing. So whatever we tell you, just no name dropping or anything like that. And so we had to respect that obviously, but we basically, I would say we got like 90% of the way there, and then we got a little extra help from some brilliant minds to get that 10% over the finish line.
And then in terms of testing, were you testing it
Mhm.
yourself or were you giving it to friends or kind of like cannabis enthusiasts? What was that process like?
Yeah, I think the first part of testing was just how do we make this like back up our claim? So you drop it in, dissolves, and then you obviously test it on yourself, make sure you feel something. I think a lot of times what's tricky and what kind of went wrong with the CBD craze was it didn't have that psychoactive component. And so for us, we would test it on ourselves and then we kind of did a soft launch, if you will. So you're right, we tested on friends, family, anybody willing. And then luckily, since we had that relationship with the hemp dispensary, they let us know in advance too, like, hey, here are the different segments you want to go after. Here's what people are asking for. This probably isn't a product that's going to be for you people who, smoke 5 joints a day, but if someone wants to come in and try cannabis for the first time, that's like a perfect segue into it. So the testing wasn't just manufacturing testing, it was also testing who's the right audience for this. And ultimately, that helped us realize that there's this kind of microdose functional market as opposed to the stoner market, if you will.
And how did you know when you guys were ready to go from that testing phase to actually launching the business? Because that's something that we think about a lot. Like, do you want to fail fast? Do you want to introduce something that is good but not great? Do you want to wait until it's
Mhm.
great? So how did you think about all of that?
Yeah, that was a tricky thing to reconcile. And if I had to go back, I think I'd probably be more patient. But for us, we realized we were sitting on something unique, and if we didn't do it, somebody else might. So what I noticed looking around the market was there were a lot of tangential or, not necessarily tablets, but other types of similar products that were popping up every single day. And so I didn't want to miss that wave that was happening, which led us to essentially go to market quickly. So we chose to commit to that lean ideology to go to market, get feedback, iterate, get better, as opposed to kind of like that waterfall methodology of having it perfect, taking a long time, and then ultimately, um, a little bit harder to iterate. And so for us, iteration was a big piece and just getting it out in front of people, getting feedback, that was huge for us. So I think it's a tricky balancing act. And I'm guessing for a product like yours, it's a way different story, having a shoot come out as opposed to something you just drop in your drink. But for us, we wanted to get something out there quickly so we could learn all of our blind spots, iterate, get better, and ultimately, as this market matures, it helps our product mature and helps us ultimately, dial in who this is actually for.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you might have touched on this already, but why did you guys decide to do THC versus CBD?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So to be completely honest, it was everybody else was doing it. We noticed that like, hey, CBD's been around for a long time. People enjoy it. It's got the use case there. But everyone's just gung ho on these THC seltzers and THC products. And so, admittedly, if I could go back, like that's another thing I might do too, is have that 1-to-1 ratio and have CBD in it. And I see tons of products out there now that are doing THC and CBD. And so we probably will do that. We'll probably do that because it's a nice, those two cannabinoids react so well together. It's such a nice calming feeling. And if you're somebody who gets anxious or anything like that, if you have that CBD component, it's a lot more calming for you. So um, I think it was one of those things where we just got so laser focused on what was out there that we didn't necessarily think like, hey, there's tons of other cannabinoids, adaptogens, there's tons of other things that we could also incorporate in this product.
So are you thinking about expansion in the near future? And if so, how hard would it be to add can CBD or other, other things to the product?
Yeah, that's where we're headed. So, what I'm noticing anecdotally, as well as just looking at other beverages that are out there, other products, is there are so many other cannabinoids and other supplements, other compounds that can basically engineer certain feelings for people or certain sensations. And so for us, CBD, that's a low-hanging fruit, but there's plenty of other options that we can have out there. You can have THCV, which is another cannabinoid that helps with energy, appetite suppression, things like that. You can do CBN, which helps people fall asleep at night. So we'll definitely start to explore other cannabinoids, and that's part of our product roadmap. And then on top of that, the adaptogens piece as well. So having things like L-theanine, magnesium, all of those can, help as well. So for us right now, it's what's next, what's one foot in front of the other, what's the next product we want to launch. Sleep will be the next one we do, but given the infrastructure that we have and what we're seeing from the market, there's a whole realm of possibilities of types of products that we can come out with.
Yeah, no, it reminds me of a supplement company that I worked for like 2 summers ago, I guess at this point. So they were doing nootropics and they were focused on kind of like feelings. So,
Mhm,
this one will give you energy, motivation, confidence, clarity, creativity,
mhm.
things like that. So, would you think about expansion in terms of emotional states or how it makes people feel, or would you focus more on the ingredients that are included and say, okay, this is THC plus CBD?
Yeah, I think they're pretty related. So for me, I think what helps the non-educated consumer kind of grasp or understand the product is having that sensation first. For the people who kind of know the ingredients more, are more picky about what they put in their body, then we can kind of back up that claim as well. So I think for us, feelings definitely are a huge psychological component to why people buy. But I'm also noticing a number of people who are asking specific questions about ingredients, compounds, etc., um, who basically want to manufacture how they feel too. So I think it's a balancing act of both.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then would you think at all about making some kind of drink, or is that just add a level of complexity that you guys don't want to tackle?
That's a great question. So luckily for us, we always have the option to collaborate with a lot of drink brands. And so Fizzy has in itself, but Hemp House and No Coast, another brand I run, they we've done limited runs of drinks in the past. I'll say this, I don't know if Fizzy will ever have a branded one because of the complexities of having a canning line, a co-packing operation, distribution piece, the weight of beverages. But the reason why we didn't do a beverage was because we basically get to play in a space where drinks can't. So what I mean by that is if you have a THC seltzer, you can have it at home, you can have it at a few locations that sell it, but I can make my own THC seltzer on an airplane or at a Vikings game or anywhere else. And so there's kind of 2 points to make there. The first is that I have that ability to kind of travel with it and take it anywhere. There's no limitations. Um, the second piece is, unlike a drink, this is something that um, it's so much easier to, I guess, manufacture. The cost of goods is incredibly like lower. So for instance, if you're shipping pallets of drinks all across the country and doing a D2C play, cost of labels, cost of logistics, finding co-packers in new markets. For instance, if I was in Minnesota and I want to sell drinks in Chicago, I'd probably need somebody local who could make those drinks for me, pack them, get them out the stores. And so for us, we're able to run really asset light because we have a lightweight product that we can ship across state lines. We can send a lot of it without having those same logistic hurdles, those same shipping costs, etc. So um, I have a lot of empathy for drink brands. Their challenges are a little bit different than ours because of most likely just the shipping piece, the weight of drinks, shipping liquids versus a tablet.
And then because your product is so light, do you encourage or almost like require people to buy like a 2 week supply or something like that? Or are you willing to send just like a really small pack for them to try?
Um, So we have 2 packs that we kind of, those are much more for like giveaways or for people who are doing samples, etc. And then we have our 20 count, which is 50 milligrams total. So we do offer the ability for people to do subscriptions online because it's a sticky product and people can order 2, 4, 6 weeks, etc. Um, but I think when it comes to like the 2 packs and getting your products out in front of people, those were a really nice kind of intro for people. So again, those are super light. You can ship them anywhere. But the nice part that we also kind of realized doing all of this was we would see people who would come in, they would look for a drink, not see the kind they wanted. They would see these kind of 2 pack tablets or 20 packs, whatever the case may be, and that would catch their attention. And we kind of realized this later, but what they would do isn't necessarily always make their own drinks. They would make the drinks that they already drink stronger. So, for instance, you got a THC seltzer and it's a 10 milligram cap in Minnesota. You have people come in and say, "Oh, I can add 5 milligrams right there, 2 other tablets, or I can dump the whole bottle in there and make this a nice 60 milligram beverage and be very relaxed." So, we do offer both for people the samples. That's one thing I will say. Getting your product out there, sampling for free at the beginning, it's kind of a you have a little bit of a loss, but it goes a really, really far way on getting your product out in front of people and ultimately getting that feedback and getting people interested. So we had people who tried the 2 packs once and they've been hooked ever since. So um, for me, it was a little scary. I was like, I don't want to just give stuff away, but they're like, no, like trust me, get products out there, get people to try them out. That's how you create a sticky customer.
So then do you think dispensaries, is that like one of the main ways that you can acquire customers, or what are the channels that you're seeing customers kind of new customers come in through?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, traditionally, in the past, a year ago, 2 years ago, I would have definitely said dispensaries, and that still is a massive place where we do a lot of business. But I'm seeing a kind of shifting of the tide a little bit. So, there's 2 areas. The first one is liquor stores have started to pick up these beverages, these types of products a lot more. So that avenue has led to this like crazy wildfire spread of us being able to sell in different liquor stores, grocery stores, apothecaries, chiropractors, anywhere. But personally, what I'm more excited about wasn't necessarily like the brick and mortar, if you will, like the I guess the wholesale option. What really got me excited was there's this untapped potential for e-commerce and direct to consumer. There's this notion that people have that you can't use these tools, you can't advertise, you can't use your same growth levers, your same acquisition channels. But in reality, you can. It's not easy, it's complicated. So I'll give you an example. For running Meta ads or Google ads, technically, I'm not supposed to be doing that. So if they're listening, I'm going to get screwed over right now. But basically, what you do is you can create a like a dummy account. So like you can always try using your own, but you risk it getting burned and shut down. So kind of make like an ad specific account. You scrub all of your imagery, so there's no mention of THC anywhere, anything like that, no marijuana leaves, nothing. And you use keywords that basically people can kind of read between the lines. So infused products or get elevated or highly delicious, things like that. So we can start to like infer what the product does. And then without you having it say that or having like, your weed leaves, whatever, people click on it and they go to a landing page. And same thing, we gotta stay compliant. So those landing pages, those also at first glance, they look like they're for just infused products. But once you click buy, then you're going to the real site. Now we have that conversion and now we have that buyer. So for us, paid ads was kind of a newer frontier, and you do have to be a little bit clever because at any given time, if the Meta or Google overlords that be catch wind that you're doing this, they do have it within their rights to obviously shut you down. So being able to navigate that was a huge unlock. And then for us, email marketing was massive as well. So having deals of the week, things like that, we've really leveraged Klaviyo to make sure that we are owning that relationship with the customer. and getting those touch points in. But the reason D2C has me so excited is the amount of things that you can learn from people doing things online. If I am just a normal beverage company, or if I just relied on stores, I'm giving my product away, I'm giving it away at a wholesale cost. My margin's obviously lower, but I have no idea who buys that stuff. I don't learn anything. I don't know who my customers are. I give that knowledge to the retailer. And so for D2C, I can see here are the keywords they clicked on, here's the ads they engaged with, here's the pages they looked at, here's what they've bought in the past. Now I can cross-sell, upsell, things along those lines. So I can start to run those same D2C playbooks that apparel brands can do, but for cannabis products. And so that in itself is still a very, very new phenomena. And there are tons of people who still don't even know that they can go buy THC products online. So to me, it's still very much we're in the first inning of this, and now we're starting to see a lot of brands pop up, even online dispensaries pop up, and people getting very clever with how they market and acquire customers.
And so you can sell and ship your product to anyone in any state, like, above 21 or whatever it is. Is that right? Or are there restrictions?
There's a few states where it's more complicated than others, but for all intents and purposes, as long as it's a hemp-derived THC product and 0.3% THC, by the 2018 Farm Bill, I'm allowed to ship it and do cross-state commerce. I will say, though, there are a few states where you have to be very cautious. And so for us, what we do is, we have an age checker online, but then we also set up certain zip codes where we know it'll be too much of a hassle to even deal with. So, for instance, ironically, a lot of the recreational states don't like hemp products, obviously because it infringes on the marijuana market. And so they highly, highly regulate it, and they make it difficult to do business there. So I think I'd have to double check and look because this legislation changes like daily. But for us, I think we're in about 37 states or so. There's some that we're like, you know what, we're not even going to bother trying. So somebody from like one of those states, for maybe Utah or something like that, where it's trickier, we'll just send them a nice message saying like, hey, unfortunately, there's some restrictions with some of the states that we can send to, but um, same time, that's from a legal perspective. I think the other thing to consider is like expanding into new markets and stuff as well. It seems like these days there's always new markets opening up, new legislation coming up, and it is a fluid thing. And so an answer I give today might be different than tomorrow. And so even though these things are protected by federal law, there are still certain state rights that we do have to respect as well.
And so do you kind of talk to a lawyer or a team of lawyers pretty regularly, or are you reading all this stuff
Yeah.
and interpreting it yourself?
Oh God, no. So basically we are I'm in an association called the Hemp Beverage Alliance, which is kind of like a trade association. A lot of THC beverage owners. We all kind of work together. So to answer your question, yes, any cannabis company, 100% have a lawyer on retainer because you damn well need them. Insurance is going to be one of your biggest costs, so definitely have that dialed in. But we work closely with state officials, with lobbyists, people at least for the Minnesota state. But being in the Hemp Beverage Alliance and other places like that, that's allowed us to also at least stay aware of legislation updates on a national level. So, for instance, like New York is this crazy market right now because THC products were, or low dose THC products were legal, and they did some emergency act and they wiped them off the shelves, and then it was legal again, but then it got, uh, you know, like the legislation got stopped. So there is a lot of uncertainty, but being in an association or alliance like that, you see people in these other states that are trying to do the same thing Minnesota is doing, and they either try and get it or else, they fail and it's on to the next one. So that's been a good place for us to at least be up to date on everything that's happening legislatively. But I've also made friends with people who are at the forefront of the people trying to make that change. So there's a lot of good people who go to Washington, who lobby and put in their time, effort, and money to get these laws passed and changed in different states. And ultimately, they are a phenomenal resource for us. So that way we don't have to know the ins and outs of every single state we sell to.
And then I have two last kind of legal questions. So the first one is, can you guys deliver on like a DoorDash or Uber Eats, for example?
Yeah.
And then are there any retailers that just don't really want to sell THC for whatever reason?
Yeah, so the first point, that's it's funny you mentioned that. I did a post about that the other day because I stumbled across, so liquor stores can obviously use DoorDash. And so I stumbled across that liquor stores were selling THC beverages on DoorDash. I don't know if DoorDash knows that, but it led to a conversation actually. It's funny you mentioned it happened this morning. So I posted about that, and someone from DoorDash and someone who was working with DoorDash actually reached out to schedule a meeting because they're interested in having hemp dispensaries sell products on there. So for us at Hemp House, we actually, like, a third of our business comes from delivery that we do ourselves. So we set up a fleet of trucks and do local delivery. But for DoorDash, like, yeah, that'd be a huge kind of unlock for us. So I think that it's happening right now, at least for me locally, not in every other state per se. And then B, I imagine that DoorDash is going to kind of wise up and see that there's this huge opportunity there. And I think they do stuff in Canada already. They have some connections with platforms like Leafly. So I definitely see that happening. Um, and then, sorry, you had the second question. It was
The
about,
second question was, are there retailers that are just maybe they're old fashioned
uh,
or for whatever reason they just don't
yeah.
want to carry your product?
Yeah, we definitely have those. Liquor stores were the people that were the most resistant, but the one thing I will say that gets in the way of any resistance, like the number one objection, isn't necessarily like the want to sell the product. It's more so I have an alcohol license, and if I start selling THC products, my insurance company will drop me. So there's this battle that happens, and what's really kind of hindered the on-premise ubiquity of THC products is that insurance piece. So people still, there's always that risk, that liability of selling THC products, and some of them are all for it. And they'll do what it takes to do it. Others are a little bit more reserved, but a handful or a good amount of them have kind of like taken that wait and see approach, only to come around and say like, wow, this is actually a huge driver for our business now because it's a whole demographic of people who want these products. So I've had people who have said no at first. 6 months later, they come back and they say, actually, like, we want these, we're on board. So the insurance piece definitely hinders things, but I think that a lot of people, it's if it sells well and there's a market for it, they're open to the idea.
And then are there other companies doing something similar with the dissolvable THC tablets, or are you the only one that you know of?
It's a good question. So one of the things that was unique for us was we are the first and only company that does a tablet that's non-effervescent, meaning that if you go have like a Noon or something like that, Alka-Seltzer, and you throw that in a carbonated beverage, like, it goes wild. It's like a Mentos and Diet Coke. And so when we looked at that, we're like, ooh, if brands are doing that, that means that it can only be for still beverages. You can't add that to your seltzer. And so the value prop kind of dies. You can't actually do any drink. And so for us, we have a patent pending formula that we created specifically so that way we could build that brand moat. But I have not seen another non-effervescent company do it. The other nice piece is that at least locally, tablet presses are things you got to get registered with the DEA. There's not a lot of ton out there that are doing like hemp products. And so for us, we've gotten, this healthy head start. There are other effervescent or similar types of products out there, but at the end of the day, what's so fascinating for me is this is really just our flagship product. There's still a whole world of different products we can come out with. And for me, it's more so just about having something out there, having that option for people. And I've been approached a lot about white labeling our products or licensing our products, and that's definitely something that we can explore too. So literally the largest THC beverage company in the world was like, we've been trying to crack this for past 3 years. So there might be a day where even if it's not our brand, it might still be our product on shelves.
So how do you think about that potential, I guess, whether you continue to try to build your own company, build out all these products, or try to sell or license, something like that?
It's a good question. It's it's a balancing act because you obviously want to, but for me, selfishly, it's a lot more lucrative to build it all myself and to kind of keep it all in-house and not kind of share the trade secrets, if you will. At the same time, it would help the category a lot if products like this were widely available and if there was competition. So, um, I haven't come to a conclusive answer on that question yet. I don't know if that's something that we'll do, and if it's the right partner, we may explore it. But for now, we have this healthy moat because it's again a very tricky product to manufacture. And at the same time, if competition comes along, they're going to have to figure out a brand new formula that's different from ours. So um, I'm personally more focused on building our brand and having a wide variety of products that we can offer as opposed to licensing and white labeling, but it's the cannabis industry. I don't think a lot of people realize just how difficult it is to be profitable in this industry. They all see that everybody loves THC and they go buy it, but there's so many hurdles that you have to go through that impact your profits, your margins, and so taxes, regulations, having to pay for certificates of analysis every time you make a product. Like there's all these operating expenses that people don't necessarily think of as well. And so for us, it's we are going to do a white label type of thing, only if it makes sense to help us be profitable long term.
And then what is your long-term vision for your company, and then also kind of like pie in the sky for your company and then also for the cannabis industry?
Yeah. I think what's going to happen is at least what's happening in Minnesota right now, I hope radiates to all 50 other states, or wishful thinking, all 49 states. Wishful thinking, which is you have this established low dose market alongside of a recreational marijuana market. So two markets that can have overlap in the types of consumers that they serve. There's a lot of people, myself included, who still smoke, who also like to have a beverage. It's just a different context for when we have that product. And so long term, I imagine that uh, I think a hemp beverage, THC beverage, that's going to become its own category that competes with alcohol. I think that's going to be massive. Looking at the data that we have, it's supposed to have a 50% compound annual growth rate. So that's remarkable to see, and our product kind of slides nicely into that wave. But for me, and as we're thinking about this industry here, like the products, the roadmaps that we're building, kind of going back to that original piece, we're going to build products that have different cannabinoids, different adaptogens, and ultimately help people feel a certain way or meet them in a certain context. So having a tablet for when you're going out and socializing versus having them before bed to unwind. And so for us, if our value prop is being able to, make your own THC drink anywhere, bring it with you anywhere, we want to make sure that we can also elicit the feeling that that user is looking for anywhere. So more cannabinoids, more adaptogens, other ingredients, and kind of being able to cover a more wide variety of use cases for people.
And are there certain people, because I've heard people say, they tried marijuana for the first time and they felt super anxious or whatever. And then you have other friends who do it every day and they're super
Hmm.
high functioning. So are
Right.
there certain people or like biologies that THC just doesn't really work for? Or I guess like, is there science behind that, or is it just a case by case kind of thing?
I think the one thing to consider, especially with the low dose market here, is that it has to be 0.3% THC by dry weight. And then you can have it react with other cannabinoids, get an effect. What happens to a lot of other people, or I guess a trend that we see a lot in the rec market, is people just look for the highest percentage of THC and like that's the product they grab. So if you are constantly having those products that are higher dosage, or if that's the only thing that you have access to, it's going to be a much different experience. So I've had plenty of horror stories, people who come in and they have an edible that they didn't know how strong it was, 500 milligrams. They're knocked out for 2 days. They saw spirits, those stories happen. And that's what's kind of nice about this low dose market is since it is regulated, you have to have a certain milligram, per dosage, only so much per container. But the other part that I haven't mentioned that the real reason why the THC beverage market has kind of taken off is the mechanism or the delivery mechanism. So smoking, obviously, that's a rush you feel right away. It's instantaneous. An edible, you take one, you hang on. You're like, I hope this doesn't go sideways. Spend 30 minutes and I don't feel anything. You take another one. Oh God. So you hear like the Tom Segura stories where his mom takes 4 gummies at night and thinks that he's trying to kill her type of thing. But for drinks, since they are not smoking, since it's not an edible, it's water soluble, so it kicks in quicker and wears off faster. So it is a lot more analogous to a wine, a beer, spirit, something along those lines. And that's something that's nice about Fizzy too. So for someone who is new or doesn't know their tolerance, it's very stackable. You can take one, see how you feel. You'll feel it in 10 or 15 minutes versus, 30 minutes to an hour. And then you can kind of pace yourself and ramp it up. So that's another very underestimated value prop that people don't necessarily realize because everybody knows somebody who took an edible and had a nightmare. So I think the mechanism of delivery also helps make that like dipping the toe in the water a little bit easier for some people.
Yeah. And it seems like there's an education piece, there's a piece around, you just have fun when you're
Mhm.
drinking this kind of product. So have you thought at all about kind of like social content or community building? Because it seems like it's a product that it would make sense to do that for. So have you thought
Absolutely.
about that?
Yeah, admittedly, I've been so focused on building hemp house that I haven't spent the time that I've wanted to do that play for Fizzy because you're right, it's a social phenomenon. So the biggest pioneer in the THC beverage space, a company called Cann, they did this phenomenal job of positioning their drinks what they call social tonics because that's really the landscape where those drinks are consumed. It's something it's sessionable. It's that perfect replacement when you're out at a bar. And their branding is all very indicative of people who chose a healthier lifestyle, but also want that fun social buzz. And so that's really the arena that we're in as well. And so one of my biggest things or biggest goals for 2024 is to be more active on social, is to dive more in on building that community, building the brand piece, and just showing people all the different types of contexts and places and things that they can do, with Fizzy tablets. So, for instance, my cousin lives in Alaska, sent me a video of him making his own THC seltzer on top of a mountain and like doing a video of panorama. And I was like, oh, that's super badass. Like, can I take that and like make an ad out of it? And, there's stuff like that that you can do. But I think for me, one of the biggest things that's helped us is community building isn't something that's always necessarily like publicly facing. And so for us, we have Facebook groups, we have emails and stuff like that. And so like one of the things that's really worked well is just even just a welcome series flow. Somebody comes to the website, tries a product one time, or say, hey, here's the founder story. Here's why we started this product, and here's what you can expect in all the different types of places that you can use it. And that's really helped us with that kind of virality coefficient where somebody tries it, the story resonates, they were able to cut out booze and now they have an alternative and they tell their friends. And so for me, one of my big goals is capturing a lot more of that and leveraging it a lot more in 2024.
Yeah, this is kind of a stupid idea, but I'll say it just to get the idea out there. I was
Hmm.
just thinking about kind of like UGC and different ads and things like that. And I was thinking
Yeah.
about someone going to the bathroom at work and like popping a fizzy into their water, or like,
Hmm.
using a fizzy in situations that you shouldn't be using them in. That would be kind
Yeah.
of kind of funny.
So I will say this, LinkedIn has been awesome for me as in the B2B space. Obviously, LinkedIn doesn't necessarily give you D2C sales, but the two like most popular pieces of content I did were two reels that I put on LinkedIn and Instagram. The first one was me going through TSA security with Fizzy, and then 'cause it's just on my keychain, and then literally me dropping, making my own drink on a flight. Like you can't get THC beverages and stuff on flights, so that was fun to do. And then um, The next one was going to a Vikings game. So same thing, walk in, going through security, nice and easy. And then one of the things that I did, which I probably shouldn't, was dropped in a beer and showing off to the whole crowd there. So um, user generated content goes a long, long way for this stuff because people, it's still such a new thing. People don't realize the different situations they should be replacing certain things with. So if you're at a game, it's you have a Coors Light, you have a beer, whatever the case may be. And so if you can show people the alternative, then that idea kind of catches on. And ironically, like that wasn't even my idea. I had a customer write a review that was like, that was a game changer. Like, how else do you deal with the Vikings besides getting a little high? I was like, oh, I didn't even think of that. So, user generated content definitely goes a long, long way, especially from a social perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And then we talked a lot about the dissolvable tablet, but you guys also
Mhm.
do, I want to say sugar cubes,
Mhm.
um, gummies and mints. So are those just like a
Yeah.
much smaller part of the business, or are they also
Uh,
kind of selling like the tablets?
yeah, that was actually a really interesting phenomena too. So we came out with our flagship product for Fizzy and those tablets, and those did really well. And so my business partner, we were kind of sitting around and we were also talking to dispensary owners, and we're like, we have the machinery and the equipment. We could easily just tweak the formula a little bit and make it, sugar tablets. So you can put it in your coffee and mix it with caffeine, whatever. So we did. We're like, you know what? Let's do it. Let's focus on coffee shops. They can sell it. And so we ended up doing that. Then from there, there was there's mints already on the market, but we realized the same exact machinery. We had the ability to do it. There are a lot of people who wanted those kind of the 2.5 milligram microdose for mints, so they could just pop them throughout the day. So to your point at work, you don't even need to put it in your drink. You can just have a breath mint. No one's going to know the wiser. So those really caught on. And then the gummies, there's an adage that everybody says in the cannabis industry is whatever product you have is great, but edibles pay the bill. So for us, if we can get gummies, that's always like a familiar thing that people know about. So it's a nice segue into other products. So we offer those because we could get them manufactured at a good cost for us. But we primarily just sell those online to help with average order value and to help people if like they don't necessarily want to try a beverage per se or a mint, they can have something they're more familiar with in a gummy.
And have you guys been bootstrapping to date? How have you been funding it? And I guess how much
Mhm.
has it cost? Has it not been too much?
Yeah, so again, this is like an extreme set of extraordinary circumstances. So my business partner had an entire manufacturing operation, whole manufacturing company all set up already. And so for us, we did bootstrap. We haven't taken any investment from anybody, not friends, family, anything, just the two of us. And um, it's incredible. Since day one, it was a profitable thing because our cost of goods was very low. It's a high margin product. We don't have the same shipping um, fees that, drinks and other things might. And so for us, we've been able to utilize the infrastructure that we have and basically just run very light. So it's tempting. I'm not gonna lie. There's plenty of people who've come with money in hand, being like, "Let me give this to you," and it takes a lot of restraint as a founder to say, "You know what? I don't need it. I'll be patient. I'll build this myself, find the right people, and not give away that slice of the pie." So there are definitely days where I'm like, "Man, I should have taken that 100K, thrown it all on ad spend, and we'll see what happens." But at the same time, I think there's also something to be proud of when you bootstrap something because you're literally doing it yourself with no outside help, and you just build, create, and every day is a new fire you have to put out. But it's one of the more rewarding feelings out there as an entrepreneur if you can do something just by sheer willpower and problem solving. Um, so who knows? I'm probably gonna get cursed in a year or two from now. I'll have some crazy investors from like Thailand or something. But for now, everything's been bootstrapped. So it's been good learning experience, and obviously you get to maintain a lot of that control. But again, I come from SaaS. My life before this was dealing with venture capitalists on a daily basis, so it's been a nice change of pace.
Yeah, I mean, we think about it similarly. I won't lie and say that anyone's offered us $100,000 yet, but generally we think about it the same way. So these
Mhm.
next ones I'll just ask kind of like rapid fire.
Sure.
So what's one or two things that keeps you up at night about this business?
Yeah, I think when I first started, one of the things that kept me up the most was how constantly things change and how something could go wrong. So I was worried, would I have a product that would make somebody react the wrong way? Would it get contaminated or would these laws change and ultimately we lose everything? And so for a while, I think that kind of kept me up at night. And then as the business matured, it was really how do we maintain profitability and scale? And so how do we get strategic with the bets that we make since we are bootstrapped? I think, when you first start off, you get that shiny ball syndrome and you see all these different ideas you could do and you can lose focus and get distracted. So trying to do and come up with solutions to all these ideas I had in the beginning was probably what kept me up at night. But luckily, we invented a sleep product that helps you go to sleep at night. So now I'm good.
And what's been your biggest learning so far?
Patience and focus. I think when we first started, I got super excited. Like, hey, there's this whole wave of things happening. There's THC beverages. They're going to go to the moon. We're going to be millionaires by tomorrow. And that's just not realistic. That's just not how life works. And so I think for me, patience and focus have been the two things that I've had to learn and what I would preach to anybody else. If you find something that you have that's different, that is working, like lean into it. You don't need to compete where everybody else is. And ultimately, where we found our success is competing where people aren't. And so being understanding, being patient, realizing you're not going to be, the Cinderella story or be rocket ship overnight, having that patience, that discipline to learn from customers, to get feedback, to constantly improve, and to ultimately, have that patience to not make dumb decisions like I'm gonna go get 100 grand today. Stuff like that really helps pay off in the long term. So when I was younger, that would keep me up at night thinking of all those things. And now it's just like when you have that focus, it just simplifies and makes the mission so much easier.
And what's been the hardest part so far?
That's a good question. The hardest part has been explaining what I do to people. It's actually hilarious. Like I have, family who I've grown up my whole life and they think weed's the devil. And now they're like some of the most supportive people out there. They're like, oh my God, and they're hooked on it. And so I think for me, the hardest part has been the educational piece to your point, getting around the stigma. And then on top of all that, like creating a profitable business that can scale. So balancing this novelty of an industry against the stigma that it's had for a long time and ultimately being able to stay positive and focused. That's always been a challenge. But yeah, I think to simplify that, the hardest thing's probably been the educational piece because it's not an easy space to be in or to understand. And you can't really explain the complexities of it in, a 5-second elevator pitch.
Yep. And then what's been the most rewarding part?
Like that story I mentioned earlier, the gentleman with the applesauce. I think the most rewarding thing as an entrepreneur is when you go out in the wild and you see your product and you didn't expect it to be there. So you go into a store, you see somebody grab it, go purchase it, check out. So for me, like one of the most rewarding things in the world is if I'm going into, buy a THC beverage somewhere and I see somebody reach and grab a fizzy bottle, someone like, hey, I love these things. These are great. Like to me, that's the most rewarding feeling. And so being able to create something that, positively impacts somebody's life, it's a feeling that you could wish you could, just trap in a bottle because every time that happens, no matter how big or small you are, it feels great.
And then what does success look like, or when will you feel like you've made it with this company?
When my wife says that I have given her enough time and my kid that says I'm around enough. Really, it's the liberty piece. So if I can have this be something that's profitable, that's scaled, that doesn't take up as much time as it does, it's a grind when you start. And so being able to be there for my family and have time to be present is ultimately, to me, what success looks like. It is addicting when you get into it, when you're trying to build, when you're trying to scale. It can take up your, not just your time, but your thoughts. Like you can't turn it off. And so to me, being able to be present and not always thinking about this and trying to find ways to win like that, that would be the most rewarding thing. And ultimately, for me, an indication of success that we built something great, that we can also now like enjoy ourselves and enjoy life. So I think it's just you pay your dues up front with the intention that the payoff down the road will be there.
And what one piece of advice would you give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
I would say that if you're going to become an entrepreneur, know what you're signing up for. It is a lonely place. It's a thankless place. There's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes, and you have to have this fortitude to really get through it. And so, if there's any advice, I would say focus on two things, which is a don't give up, don't quit. That's the number one piece of advice I can give. There's so many times where you can stop and say like, call mercy, but the people with that fortitude to just keep pressing through, to keep solving problems, to get back up, that goes a very, very long way. And then the other thing I'll say in that same vein is be a problem solver. It's one thing to be somebody who can point out what a problem is. It's another thing to be able to be that person that can go in and fix it. Whether or not you're qualified, whether or not you know what you're doing, having that skill to say, I can solve a problem, it's huge for any entrepreneur. So there are problems where I had no clue where I was doing, but if you learn, educate yourself, you don't quit on it, and you just keep persevering and you figure out a way, that's ultimately how you get to that uncharted new territory. And that's really where growth happens. It's not in the comfort zone. It's when you get outside of that and push yourself. So those are the two things that if any aspiring entrepreneur was listening, I would say focus on those two assets or skill sets.
And then last question, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you started?
It's a good question. I was very starry-eyed when we first started, meaning I thought THC was great, give me quick, easy money, awesome, let's ride this wave. Um, I think I would have been a lot more patient on how quickly we went to market, how we branded, and ultimately how we built the business, because it is that trade-off. You go to market quickly, you learn a lot, or you take your time, perfect it, and go to market strategically. And so I think I would have personally gone back and worked on finding that balance a little bit better of putting in more time, research, feedback before launching something. And ultimately just having that patience to say, you don't need to do every single thing every single day. It's all right if some things fall by the wayside. Just focus on what matters the most each given day. So, um, yeah, it's definitely, I'm always learning new stuff every single day. I always wish I could go back and fix decisions I made, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, etc. But one of the things that has been comforting is like I can't go fix anything. So I can't go back in time and reverse a decision. I made it, I live with it and learn and grow. And don't make those same mistakes you made in the past type of thing.
Yeah, that all makes sense. That's all I had.
Awesome.